Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our bizarre and unusual world. So today I'm going to be covering a very interesting unsolved mystery case that actually takes place in a different country. Today I will be covering the Dyatlov Pass incident. A heads up and a warning for you guys. This is an unsolved mystery case of sorts, but it does have some aspects relating to death or how bodies were discovered. So if you are sensitive to that type of material, you might want to skip this episode. So as usual, I will be covering the who, what, when, where, why, and how of the Dyatlov Pass incident. So more recently, this case was brought to my attention by a family member that thought that I might find it interesting, and they were correct. This case is very fascinating, and looking over some of my requests for our bizarre and unusual world, I also see that Aurora Whispers requested this, so thank you so much for the request, hon. You are right, it is a super fascinating and interesting mystery. So me personally, I had never really heard about the details or what this case was all about until it was fully brought to my attention. So I am very curious to see if any of my American viewers have heard of this case or if this is new to you like it was to me. So let's start with the where. Where did this whole mystery take place? So it took place in the northern Ural Mountains in what was then the Soviet Union. This specific case and mystery is supposed to be very, very famous or infamous in Russia. You could say it's kind of like their JFK assassination conspiracy. So many people here in the States question what happened to JFK or how he died, all of these conspiracies around it, and you could say the same for the Dyatlov Pass in Russia. There are so many different theories, ideas, mysteries surrounding this case. It's just this huge, fascinating, and mysterious incident. Now, it is very interesting. The local Mossi native people have a name for this mountain, and it roughly translates to Dead Mountain or Mountain of the Dead. Now, this is supposed to be because of the lack of growth on this mountain, lack of animals or things to hunt. You know, it doesn't just mean Mountain of the Dead, but as we further go into this case, it is very interesting and creepy that the locals call this specific location Mountain of the Dead. Now on to the when. When exactly did this take place? So this incident took place in 1959, so we are actually coming up on the 60th anniversary of this mystery. So now let's get to the core of this story. What exactly is the Dyatlov Pass incident? What is the mystery? What is the tragedy behind all of this? What is Dyatlov Pass incident? So in 1959, 10 hikers, that was 8 men and 2 women, set out to complete a hiking certification in Russia. Now, this was no ordinary hike. This certification was for a high-level sports hiking certification, grade 3 master level. This would take a lot of work, a lot of skill, and intelligence to complete such a high-level certification. So to give you a breakdown of what exactly these kids had to complete, I call them kids because all but one of them was younger than me, but the basic breakdown of what they had to complete for this certification: they needed to hike 186 miles. The hike needed to last a minimum of 16 days. Half of this hike needed to be in uninhabited territory, and it was required that 62 of the miles of this journey would be in difficult terrain. See, so this was like a big deal. This was not just like some easy hike you go and do in a day. This was a huge deal for them. Now, as the hike progressed on, one of the male hikers did have to turn back because of his own personal health issues, so that left 9 hikers, and I'm going to get to them shortly. So they planned to send out a telegram on February 12, 1959, when they successfully and safely made it to their destination. So the days went on, and at first no one really thought to panic because it wasn't unusual to be a couple days behind schedule. But as the time progressed, more people started to worry about where these kids were. Family members, friends, people from their school, people that worked with how to get this certification, they were wondering where exactly this hiking group was. So eventually they did form a search party to locate these hikers. Now this was made up of military, of regular people, and investigators searching for these 9 hikers. When they finally found the tent belonging to the party, it was February 26th, so it had taken them a couple weeks to locate the tent. Now, the tent was still partially standing. Part of it had collapsed because of new snowfall, but they could still locate where exactly the structure was. When they went inside the tent, they actually didn't find anything unusual or weird. Everything looked to be in its place and in order. However, they didn't find any of the hikers inside the tent. 9 people, and none of them were inside the shelter. They did note that there was a slash in the back of the tent, and from further analysis, they discovered that the tent was slashed from the inside out. So, because none of the 9 people were inside the tent, they continued their search, and over a few months' time, they were able to find all 9 hikers dead in the surrounding areas. Now, there are so many questions and mysteries with this case, and unfortunately, a lot of that information will never be solved. It did happen almost 60 years ago, and there are some things that are just going to be left unexplained because there were no survivors. All 9 hikers died, and with that, they died with the secrets of what exactly happened to these kids. So now on to the who was affected. Who were the victims in this case? Who were the hikers? So the first 2 bodies were found about 0.93 miles from the tent, and that was on February 26th, 1959. I will say that there are various sites and sources that share photos of how all of these bodies were found. They were used as part of the investigation, obviously, and you can find them on Google and other sites dedicated to this case. I will personally not be showing those specific photos in this video, but I will leave that information below if you want to do some more of your own research. So these 2 men were laying side by side, and they were found with no jacket, no pants, and no shoes on. So first up, we have Yuri Doroshenko. He was a radio engineering student. He was described as a very smart and brave person. He had actually chased off a bear on a previous trip, which is crazy. He was 21 years old. He was found in a checkered shirt, swim trunks, under his long underwear. However, the left leg of his underwear was torn away. He had no shoes on, and he was face down in the snow. His arms were folded under his head like a pillow, you could say, and there were broken cedar branches underneath him. The second body found was Yuri Krivonishenko. So he was kind of known as the funny guy, or the class clown, you could say. He was an entertainer, and he played music with a mandolin along their journey. He had studied construction and hydraulics. He was 23 years old. Now, he was found a little bit more covered with an undershirt, long underwear, and socks on his feet. He was on his back, face up. It's believed his mouth and eyes had been pecked at by animals because of the condition of his face. So because there were broken cedar branches under these 2 bodies, people assumed that they had been climbing the trees that they were beside. Some people suggest that this was a way to get a better view of the area, had they lost track of where their tent was, or were they just trying to get a better idea of where they were at. Others suggest that they were trying to get away from something, and by climbing up like 15 feet up this tree, they were trying to hide or get away from whatever was attacking them. Or people just suggest that they were getting firewood. There was a small fire found next to these 2 bodies, but after looking it over, it hadn't burned for very long. The next day, February 27th, they found 2 more bodies with the help of search dogs. They were just slightly underneath the new fallen snow. They found the leader of the group, whose name would forever be tied to this incident, and that was Igor Dyatlov. So as I said, he was the leader of this group, and from past experience was known as an excellent leader. He was smart, and he had a very scientific mind. Many people trusted his knowledge and his choices to lead a group. He was 23 years old. So when they found Igor, his arms almost looked like they were up defensively in a gesture, but they actually believe he was clutching the birch tree, most likely desperate attempt to like hold on to something, perhaps trying to fight against those elements, you know, the cold, the snow, all of it. He was dressed a bit warmer with a shirt and a fur vest and ski trousers. He was more dressed for the conditions, you could say, but still no hat, no gloves, and no shoes on. He did, however, have like mismatched socks, and it's noted that his watch was stopped at 5:31. The second victim found that day was Vinita Komogrova, or also known as Zina. So she was a radio engineering student and was 22 years old. She was also found just under the surface of the snow, laying on her right side, face down, and arms twisted beneath her. There was also dried blood on her face. She was dressed more reasonable, you could say. She had a hat, jacket, ski pants, no shoes again, but she did have socks on. Then we jump to March 5th. So at this point, the search parties are basically probing the snow with long poles, trying to press down to touch the ground, but the snow was so deep, they weren't even close to like hitting the actual ground. At this point, they are really just trying to locate the rest of the bodies. So Rustic Slobodan was found next. You could say he was kind of the rich kid of the group, but not the stereotypical spoiled rich kid type of person. He was very much a part of this group. He had graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering, and he was 23 years old. So he was found face down with his right leg bent and his fist to his chest. He was wearing a checkered shirt and several pairs of socks, actually, and one shoe. His body was angled, so it kind of seemed like he was looking towards their camp. He was almost kind of facing the direction of where the tent was located. It does need to be noted that Rustic actually had blunt force trauma to his head, and some people speculate that that could have been from a fall, and others say that it's from a different source. So skipping ahead in time, essentially waiting for the snow to melt off, they were able to locate the final 4 bodies on May 4th, 1959. So they first noticed an odd pile of branches and clothing. They noted that the branches had been cut with a knife, and the material there looked like it had been sliced up to maybe wrap yourself in, as potentially a way to stay warm. So about 75 meters further away from the tent and past that cedar tree I had mentioned, they found the 4 bodies in a ravine. 2 of the bodies were holding on to each other, probably in an attempt to stay warm, but these would be the last 4 bodies of the hikers. So first we have Lyudmila Dubomina. She was studying the construction industry and economics. She was quite the character. Actually, there's a story that on a previous trip, she had accidentally been shot, and as they carried her back down the trail, she was her same normal self, making others laugh. She was just quite the character. She was 20 years old. While she was found properly dressed, there were some problems with her body. For instance, her tongue and her eyes were both missing. People speculate that this is just the work of scavengers, and other people say that this is because the bodies were left up there for a few months. But some reports say that she actually had like coagulated blood in her stomach, which could potentially suggest that her tongue was removed while she was alive. I don't want to think about that. But other reports do say that her tongue was not cut out or torn out, so this could just be from the natural decaying process, and she was also partially found in water. But there are certain aspects of this part of the information where there seems to be some things that are missing from the reports. Next up, we have Alexander Kolevatov. He was kind of the quiet one of the bunch, you could say. It's noted that he brought his old pipe along for the trip, even though everyone had agreed to not smoke or drink for the duration of this hike. Let's see. It's also noted that he didn't share his journal entries with his friends. He was just more of a private person compared to the rest of the group, and he was 24 years old. Next up, we have Nikolai Thibeaux. He had graduated in industrial civil construction. He was very well educated and a very humorous guy, and Nikolai was 23 years old. And lastly, we have Semyon Zorotoryov, or Sasha as the group knew him. So he was the oldest of this group, and he actually came into this hike later than the rest of the people. Although the age difference, he did fit in well with the group nicely. Semyon, or Sasha as the group knew him, he was actually a World War II veteran, so it's safe to say that he had a lot more life experience compared to the other kids, and he was 37 years old. And I also did want to include Yuri Yudin. He is known as the survivor of this incident. He's actually the one hiker that turned back because of his health. So he wasn't actually in the tent that night. He wasn't there with his friends when it all happened. But people do still call him the survivor because he was part of the Dyatlov Pass hiking group. And it's just really sad that he's like the only one of the group that survived, and he had to lose his friends that way. It's really sad. I don't even want to know what his survivor's guilt was like for that. It's just so sad. He did actually live a nice and full life, though. He died on April 27th, 2017. So a very important part to this case, I feel like, is how. How were these kids prepared for this? This is not a story of some foolish kids going out on a hike and making mistakes, and this is why it happened. These kids were highly trained, very intelligent, and prepared for this type of journey. This shouldn't have happened to them. To gain this type of certification, they had to be skilled in a lot of different things. And they also had to document everything they did on this journey to further prove so they could get that specific sport certification. So that meant that everyone took diaries or journals with them, and they had to take turns documenting their different choices, different paths they took, or how exactly they completed this hike so that they could prove and earn that certification. They also took cameras with them to also use as part of their evidence for what they had done throughout the hike. Some of these photos I have been sharing with you. That's an interesting part of this case, is there's so much documentation from these victims. You don't always get that from the victims, but you have the journal entries, you have photographs of all these kids looking like they're having the best time. They're all smiling and happy, and it's really tragic to think that in like a matter of days, these 9 people died. So I'm sure you've gathered that these people were at an expert level, and it doesn't make sense that they weren't able to make it. It also doesn't make sense on why these 9 hikers left their tent. That is like the biggest question within this case. These 9 hikers were so intelligent, they would have known they wouldn't make it or survive outside the tent. So why did they leave the tent? So for the why of this episode, we are going to be looking at why they didn't make it to their destination. This is going to be all the theories and ideas that people have surrounding this case. However, there are a lot of theories and conspiracies within the Dyatlov Pass incident, so I'm just going to focus on some of them, some of the more popular ones. So as I said, one of the biggest questions for this case is why did they leave the tent? It is very out of character for these expert skilled hikers to think that they could survive outside the tent. So why did they leave? They were also so close to their goal. It was like about 6 miles from the town that had been their destination goal throughout this hike. And then we start to look at the bodies, and things get weirder and creepier and more unexplained. So according to reports, 6 of these hikers died from hypothermia, and 3 of them died under suspicious circumstances. So a coroner actually said that it looked like a massive force trauma, like something that you would get from a really bad car accident. And you can actually reference all of the hikers' injuries on some of the sites I'm going to leave below for further information. You can kind of see what I'm talking about. So the weirdest part is, like, even though they had all of these internal injuries and some slight bruising and things like that, there were like no contusions or like external wounds that could really relate to the trauma these bodies had suffered. Some people suggest that these hikers just could have been running through the snow and into the woods and took a fall, and that would explain the damage. But at the same time, things don't add up. Some of the hikers' hands did have what looked to be defensive wounds. So were they fighting off an attacker, or was this potentially from them climbing the trees, or something else? Why did they have the wounds on their hands? But most of the speculation comes from, why did they leave the tent? So as I said, a forensic expert did look at the tent, and the slash on the back of the tent was made from the inside going out. So were they trying to run from something? Was something blocking the front of the tent so they couldn't escape? Who exactly went out the back of the tent? Was it just one person, or did the whole group run out the back? Clearly, something crazy had happened because these 9 expert hikers ran out of their tent without their shoes on. Sure, some of them had socks, but you don't really run away without your shoes into the freezing cold snow unless something crazy is happening. Panic, fear, something happened to make these highly skilled hikers run out of the tent like this, in this state of undress. And whatever they were running from, or why they were running away from the tent, had to be a big deal because all of them went quite a distance away from the tent. So one of the official causes of this mystery that was released was compelling unknown force. That was the explanation that was given for why these 9 hikers had died. compelling, unknown force. That is very vague. So let's get into the theories now. One of the more natural theories is that an avalanche occurred. So the hikers could have very well heard an avalanche coming towards the tent. They could have cut the back to escape the snow and ran further into the woods to get away from this avalanche. The only problem with this theory is the location that they set up their tent. The search party immediately said that it wasn't the proper area or terrain for an avalanche. The hillside that they were near, it didn't match up. The ground around them did not match up for what is required for an avalanche to happen. So that theory kind of goes out because the first responders said that, nah, it's not an avalanche. And also, you would think that if an avalanche came, the entire tent would be like buried under lots of snow, but it was still partially standing when the search party got there. So another more natural theory to what happened to these hikers would be something relating to their stove. So they had a stove that they carried with them and hiked with, and they rebuilt it every night when they made camp. So this theory is that something went wrong with how the stove was built that night, or something caused it to malfunction basically, and that smoke started pouring into the tent. With this theory, people suggest that that's why they slashed open the back of the tent as some form of ventilation to get the smoke out. Others say that it became too much, and so that's why the hikers had to flee the tent and get out because they couldn't breathe with all the smoke. But at the same time, it doesn't explain why they ran so far away from the tent if it was just smoke. There's also some conflicting reports with this theory. Some of the search party, when they went into the tent, some of them claim that the stove was set up and it looked as if they had been using it to make dinner. Others report that the stove was still packed away and wasn't used at all. So there's some conflicting theories with that. They do suggest that some burn marks or some blood around some of the hikers' mouths could be smoke inhalation or burns on their body. But there's like hits and misses for this theory. If it was the stove malfunctioning and a bunch of smoke going into the tent, why did they have to go so far from the tent? They could have just stepped outside and tried to fix it from right outside the tent. So another theory is related to the Mansi native groups of people. So this theory suggests that the Dyatlov Pass group of hikers went into sacred land and the Mansi people didn't like it. So they reacted, essentially. They do have legends about this mountain. Remember, they call it Dead Mountain or Mountain of the Dead. And you can see different photographs from the hikers' cameras of different marks on the trees from the Mansi people. So they were surrounded by them for a lot of their journey. The problem with this theory is a lot of people say that the Mansi people are very kind and nice. It's not in their nature or characteristics to behave in that type of way, and they wouldn't have really cared. It was kind of ancient things on the mountain, and they wouldn't have cared anymore if they went hiking up there. And also, some Mansi people were actually part of the search party trying to help the families locate their hikers, their children. So would they have really done that if they were the ones that killed them? I mean, I don't know. I guess it could have been them. Maybe they got ticked off for some reason. But a lot of people say that these Mansi people are very peaceful. So I just don't really get into this theory. So we also have theories relating to the military or the KGB. Now these are some weird like spy military type ideas and theories. So something curious that was found on some of the bodies was radiation. It wasn't like a lethal dose, but it was an unusual level. Also, the clothing had twice the amount of radiation that the victim's skin did. So what does that mean? Did they come across something that they shouldn't have come across? Did they see something they shouldn't have? Did they have something with them that would cause these radiation levels? That's kind of one part of this theory. Another relates to Sasha or Semyon, the older man of the group that joined the hiking party late. So he was a veteran, so some people speculate that was he placed in this group to watch over the kids because they were potentially hiking in a delicate area, to make sure they didn't see anything or to keep tabs on what they did see. Was that why he was placed in this group at a later time? Maybe this is why he told the kids his name was Sasha instead of telling them his given name. However, he did die with the rest of the group, so that's questionable, right? He actually died with his camera around his neck. Unfortunately, that film had water damage, so it couldn't be recovered. I would be very curious to see what was on his roll of film since he passed with it around his neck. People also say within this theory that the Dyatlov group stumbled across something that they shouldn't have, and in turn they were killed as part of the cover-up for whatever they saw. Going back to Lyudmila Dumanina, her tongue was removed, and some people debate if that was like a form of torture. Or there are other sources that say the eyes and the tongue are really good places to check for radiation levels. So potentially were some of the eyes and tongue removed to hide those specific radiation levels for something they came across? Missile testing is also a really big theory within like the military aspect of this case. There's also another story of a nurse on a train talking about this incident and how there was actually 11 bodies flown out, but 2 of the bodies disappeared. So where did they go? If you can believe that, of course, we don't know if that story is true. Another theory revolves around the pilot that refused to fly with these bodies unless they were in zinc-lined coffins. Now that may seem like an odd request, but apparently zinc helps to protect you from biological issues, toxins, or agents of that kind. So what did the pilot know or suspect? What was wrong with the bodies? Whatever theory relates to the military or the government, it is safe to say that something was going on because the government really took control of these funerals. There was rules on who could have an open casket, who could attend the funerals, some of the bodies were separated. There was a lot of rules and restrictions involving this case. And there is obviously information that is missing from this case. So a lot of people speculate that the government is covering up, hiding certain aspects of this incident. Next up, we have the Yeti Theory, which is very interesting and creepy when you think about it. So there is a photo from one of the cameras that shows a figure off in the distance that looks to be staring over at the camera. Now the camera is focused on the trees and the snow right near them in the foreground. So in the background it's blurry, so you can't quite see what exactly is standing there. But there's a figure of some sort standing off in the distance. And a lot of people speculate that they came across the Yeti, you know, a cousin of the Bigfoot. No matter what is in the picture, it is very creepy, has a creepy vibe to it. So did the Yeti attack them? Did potentially the native people know what lived on that mountain and that's why it was called Dead Mountain, because this creature lived up there? Now, this easily could have just been the hikers playing around, taking funny pictures. There's actually a few different pictures like that where they're just joking and having fun along their hike, but the picture to me is just like really creepy. It's weird, and it's also the last picture on the roll, which is odd to me as well. Also, in one of the diaries, there's this like one statement that gives me the chills. It's creepy. So now we know that the mink are real. A mink is apparently the equivalent of a Russian Yeti. So that's just like so creepy when you pair it with the picture of like the unknown creature or person with the diary entry. It's creepy. Did the Yeti attack them? That's what they were running from. That's why they sliced open the back of the tent to get away. Were they climbing the trees to get rid of this huge Sasquatch Yeti dude? A lot of people find the Yeti theory to be absolute bullshit, but I think it's kind of creepy because the picture is creepy. And the idea of like this Yeti creature like following this group of hikers around a mountain sounds like a horror movie. Some people even believe that the trauma that Rustic Slobodan had to his head, the blunt force trauma, could have been caused by this creature. Did he take a blow to the head while the others ran off into the woods? There's also this theory around infrasound, which is basically these like natural tones that in some cases can drive people crazy. So the theory that is around this is that the infrasound started happening and that someone went crazy in the tent. Probably not all of the hikers, because it's depends on each person how the infrasound affects you. So it's kind of unrealistic that the whole group of all 9 would go crazy. But the theory kind of relates that maybe one person or a couple people started to go crazy, they started destroying the tents, or they ran out into the woods, the others followed, or the others ran for their own safety. That's kind of how the infrasound theory goes for this case. Next is the Orbs Theory. This theory revolves around these big, like, fire-looking orbs in the sky that apparently lasted like 15 to 20 minutes. And actually, like, over 30 people witnessed these orbs throughout the sky in that area. So does that go back to, like, military testing of some kind? Is that what the orbs in the sky that people witnessed? And there were reports of these orbs in the sky, like, during the kids' trip, during when they would have disappeared, and also the search party said that they saw these specific orbs in the sky during their search as well. There's also this one picture from one of the cameras that people speculate is one of the orbs or fireballs in the sky. So what are these orbs? Are they military? Experiments of some kind? Are they ghosts maybe, living on Dead Mountain? Or are they aliens? Going into our next theory of aliens. Aliens did this to the Dyatlov Pass group. Extraterrestrial interaction could explain a few different pieces to this mystery, okay? Could explain the bright lights in the sky. Could also explain the different radiation levels on some of the bodies. It could also potentially relate to some of the almost inhuman trauma that some of the bodies suffered from. Is it like new alien technology that was part of the experiment? The wrong place, wrong time? What exactly could like an alien species want with these group of hikers? It's a little far-fetched, I know, but some of the things with like the light in the sky, the radiation, and some of the trauma to the bodies is very interesting and can kind of relate to other extraterrestrial reports in the past and since then. As I was doing my research for this video and learning about more of the theories, I couldn't help but wonder about their hypothermia. Now granted, we still have no idea why they would have left the tent, but perhaps they found these bodies partially undressed because of a symptom of hypothermia. It is called paradoxical undressing, which is a common symptom of hypothermia, taking your clothes off. During this part of hypothermia, the victim would essentially experience a massive hot flash and feel the need to strip. And so some of those specific clothes that could have been stripped when they were out in the cold could have been in that pile of like sticks and clothing pieces, and others could have used it to like wrap back up. But I just couldn't help but wonder about the hypothermia and if that is why they found them in such a state of undress. No matter what theory you think is true or what you believe, I think it's safe to say that there is not everything released about this case. There's some sort of cover-up or government keeping secrets in this case, as there is with a lot of different mystery and unsolved cases. It does need to be noted that also one camera and one diary are missing. Were they just lost on the mountain? Were they lost in the snow? Or were they taken as part of the cover-up? Very interesting. I would like to know what is on that camera or what is written in that journal. So was the blood on their hands and faces defensive wounds, or is there another explanation? Were they just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Was this an experiment gone wrong? Or what exactly scared them enough to leave the tent into the frigid weather? Whew, this has been a really big case, and I wanted to get the information right. It has been a big one, and it's so interesting, and there's so much speculation and mystery behind this. So what do you guys think of the Dyatlov Pass incident? Have you even heard of it before? What theory do you think is right? What exactly do you think happened to these 9 hikers? I personally don't know with this one. Some of the theories match up with some of the evidence and some of it doesn't match up. So there's just so much mystery and secrets behind this incident. I think it's hard to say what exactly did happen to them. And sadly, I think it's going to be one of those cases that we never have the answer to. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Dyatlov Pass incident. I will have some links in the description for more information for you guys. Also, a link to the Astonishing Legends podcast. They do a fantastic job in a 2-part podcast about this incident, and they have way more information than I have, so you guys should definitely check that out if you want to learn more about the Dyatlov Pass. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next episode.